Call the Apache Junction City Council work session to order. Can we get a roll call?
Mayor Surtee,
Here.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
Here.
Councilmember Barker,
Here.
Councilmember Evans,
Here.
Councilmember Rizzi,
Present.
Councilmember Struble,
Here.
Councilmember Waldron.
Here.
7 members present. You have a quorum, Your Honor.
Interviews of applicants for annual appointments and reappointments to Construction Board of Appeals, Health and Human Services, Municipal Property Corporation, and Public Safety Personnel Retirement Board. Kathy?
Yes, your first one for this evening is the Construction Code Board of Appeals. In this particular case, this is the one that's according to the building code requirements. And the individuals are appointed by title or skill. What you have are the positions with the terms ending on October 31st are the professional architect or engineer, contractor other than a general contractor, and then there is an existing vacancy from last year under the general contractor provision. You have 2 individuals, Jesse Gage and Dallas Dewey, who are asking to be reappointed, and you have 1 new applicant, Robert Rauschenbach.
And I'll remind everybody that Robert Schroeder will be dropping off of this board as well, so come January, we will need another one. So,
And this board hasn't met in the past year, so.
so I should call the highlighted ones?
Yes, you have those individuals for reappointment are Jesse Gage,
Yep.
Dallas Dewey, and then Mr. Rauschenbach is also here.
So Jesse Gage?
Can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
Hello?
Anything different you want to tell us than a couple weeks ago?
No, I don't think so. Any questions for me?
Other than a couple of weeks ago? Other than a couple of weeks ago?
So this board didn't meet in the last year. When is the last time this board met?
I'm not aware.
9, 10 years ago, maybe?
That was probably Dennis Dixon era, so 2010, 2008, as I recall.
So this
I think
board
it's-
they must be doing a good job then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's met once since I've been on the
Yeah.
council this last.
I guess that's it then.
Okay, thank you.
Would ask your
So you're
question.
doing good.
Thank you. Kathy, they don't have to meet once a year for,
That's
Financial
not in this
deal.
particular instance. This one's a creation of the building codes. So while they have to comply with the open meeting law, there's no mandate that they have to have at least 1 meeting a year.
What if this board went away?
That's a city attorney. I believe it's required by the building code.
Yeah, then Mr. Mayor, there'd be a problem, because then you don't have an appellate board for building code issues. Also, the dangerous building code, you need this for appeals, essentially.
Can you give us an example of when this board could meet?
Sure. An individual gets a notice of dangerous building. Individual would have a certain amount of time to appeal that, and it would go to the Construction Board of Appeals. So that would be an example. So that's a due process right that individuals have.
So it's up to the business that's accused to request this?
for individuals.
Correct.
Okay.
Joel, just one more, but the city code could be changed.
No.
Well, yeah, right now, but the question was, why do we have this requirement? And that's because the city code requires it.
It's the building code that requires
Yes.
it.
Could the
Building-
Board of Adjustment do this job?
No.
I'd say no. Board of Adjustment does other things, and that's more of a zoning board. This is a construction board of appeals, construction codes, building codes.
Okay.
so that was gonna be my question is, because if, say, worst case scenario, we didn't have enough people to fill all the seats on this board, we couldn't combine the same people for
Oh,
that?
no.
I believe if you didn't have enough, I think by operational law, you'd still have a hearing. They would get their hearing, even if, say, you had 3 members.
Okay. Dallas Dewey.
So,
Anything you'd like to tell us? And have you enjoyed your
nervous.
time on the board?
pardon?
Have you enjoyed your time on the board?
Yes. Yeah.
And you wish to be reappointed?
Yeah. I'll, do whatever I can do to help.
And you're a contractor?
Right. Electrical contractor.
What kind did you say? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, what?
What kind of a contractor?
Electrical.
Electrical? Okay.
Any more questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And Robert Rauschenbach.
Hello again.
Hello again.
I don't have much to add. Doesn't sound like this board meets very much. I think that's probably a good thing and a tribute to your building department.
So you're an architect by trade, though?
I'm a retired architect.
Yeah.
I'm not currently registered, though. That was a question that
Robert,
was asked at the,
Robin, you were on the phone, so you heard his
Yeah,
impressive resume last
I
time.
did. I did.
And so in essence, just so I understand, the architect position was already filled, or it's not, it's being reconsidered. And so does he have to be licensed in the state to qualify for this particular?
City attorney question.
I believe he does. Yes,
Says who?
I think the code.
So this could be a code we could maybe look at in the future and tweak it a little to make it a little more
Well,
simple and streamlined.
I think the building code requires certain
Yes.
professionals to be on the board, so I wouldn't suggest changing those requirements.
But like if someone's a lifetime doctor and he just quit his practice a year ago, he's still a doctor. He has all that knowledge.
He's not licensed.
Correct, but this code requires certain types of architects, engineers. So I think I would go with what the code says, which you have adopted. And it does afford all the due process necessary. These codes have been researched for many, many years. I wouldn't question these uniform codes. I don't recommend that, let me put it that way.
Okay.
I guess my concern would be with that requirement. What do you do if you run, there's probably not a high number of people in the community that would be interested with that background. What do you do then if you can't fill it?
Well, you do the best you can, and like I said, if you don't have the quorum, then you do the best you can, and if you have at least 2 members, by operational law, my argument in court would be, hey, we tried to get the members, this is the best we could do for the due process rights for this particular appeal.
So a case could go forward if
Oh,
we
yes.
didn't have, and so I guess, and I don't know if this was what Jeff was alluding to, but why have it in the code if we could still do it without having that person, I guess, why, you know what I mean?
Well, the best case scenario is you follow the code the way it's written. And if you can't, then the fallback position is, we tried to get those people, we couldn't get it. However, this is the best board we could come up with. It is very rare to get one of these cases. And like I said, like Councilmember Barker said, she's had one case that she recalls since she was a council member. I recall one with Dennis Dixon, and I think the applicant withdrew at one point. We set it up and then they withdrew it. These are very rare cases, so I don't recommend changing the code, though, for that reason.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm just here to help, so I don't want to cause an issue with the city, so I'm happy to withdraw if they.
Well, those other
everybody
two
thinks
guys aren't
that's the
architects
correct-
either, so.
No, please, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we need to pick 2 out of the 3 tomorrow then.
But they have to fulfill the specific areas that they.
Well, and
Right, 2 to be picked tomorrow, correct? Yes.
but when Robert,
Is that right?
when Robert Schroeder resigns, will we pick at that point, or has he resigned from this board yet?
He has not
He's not.
resigned, and I believe that's a future agenda item, correct, Mr. City Manager?
That is correct. We're going to come forward on Thank you, Your Honor. We will be coming forward with an agenda item and discussion on how you want to fill those once we get to that point. I'm showing 3 positions available with 2 reappointments and 1 new applicant, plus the one you're talking about right now. So you got a lot to fill.
And Mr. Schroeder's position is a contractor other than a general contractor, which I think is a more common slot to fill.
So there are 3 tomorrow.
There's
Okay,
3 tomorrow.
all right.
But we don't, none of the applicants are general contractors, though. So,
Yes, for that one vacancy?
yeah.
Yes.
Bring it back.
Okay, Health and Human Services. And,
Mayor, prior to bringing can Kathy read what the
Sure.
Health and Human Services does?
This is what they may do. They may conduct public hearings to determine the needs of the city residents regarding public health, human services, care of the elderly, handicapped, and developmentally disabled. They can hold public forums, seminars, and work with other agencies. They review the request, which you're most familiar with, the annual request submitted by the Health and Human Service providers for the city funding. And they can assist in the development of healthcare facilities and make recommendations regarding elderly health care and emergency transportation programs. A little bit of background, what you most frequently see are the annual recommendations. But over the years, this commission has rendered a recommendation on what was proposed at one time, which was a healthcare excise tax. They also had input on the Apache Junction Health Center, which is the center on Southern, just west of Ironwood. When Dr. Siegel created his heart hospital, they had input on that. And then when Dr. Siegel passed away and that became the Banner Goldfield Hospital, they also had input on that. So
and there are 2 positions here coming up,
both,
correct?
yes, both of the individuals who had been serving for several years do not wish to be reappointed, and you have several applicants. Mr. Shane Beck and Chris Ferrier were not able to be here this evening.
Which brings us to Jennifer Mirnicki Nojunas.
Hello. I'll just give a little background about myself. My name is Jennifer Mirnicki Nojunas. I recently relocated from Pennsylvania, so I'm a new resident, and I was very excited to find out about your commissions. I have an extensive background in human services. I served at both the county and state levels in Pennsylvania government, in the fields of healthcare, child welfare, and early intervention. I've been able to continue my state career here in the state of Arizona. I currently work for the Department of Economic Security under the Arizona Early Intervention Program, where I do program oversight and monitoring and quality assurance for all the early intervention programs in the state of Arizona. So I've been very fortunate. I'm a master's level social worker, a licensed social worker, and I'll be transferring my license here to Arizona. I plan on working on my clinical license out here as well. And in December, I will be having my final defense for my PhD, which will be in administration and leadership studies. So I really feel that my background would be very helpful in terms of bettering our community, and I think the biggest honor I could have would be to serve my community here in Apache Junction. My husband and I loved it here. We looked for about 9 years, and then we looked all over Phoenix, and we ended up coming right back to our first choice, which was Apache Junction, and we've been very fortunate. So thank you for having me to interview, and do you have any questions?
You're from Western Pennsylvania, so you're
Eastern.
not a Steeler fan,
Eastern Pennsylvania.
right?
I'm I'm an Eagles fan.
Good.
My husband's
Because I don't
a
think a
Steelers
Steeler
fan.
fan could be compassionate about anything, so
Oh.
that's good.
Being from Western Pennsylvania, right here, I don't know about that.
Being a Bengals fan and what happened yesterday, I agree with you. I agree with you.
Any questions?
I just had a couple. First of all, thank you. To have an LMSW apply is great. You do have a wealth of experience. Since you work for the state, usually, you know, once a year we go through our funding and we have a small bit of money available to spread out through the community. If you had any conflict of interest, would you have a problem recusing yourself, or?
No, absolutely not.
Okay,
Absolutely not.
recently, when Health and Human Services has
Okay.
come, they wanted to expand actually what they were doing in the community. Would you have any problem time-wise?
I don't believe so. I would make time, because this is very exciting. I just think Apache Junction has so much potential, and I really would like to be involved in the community. And I really feel my background in human services, this is a good fit.
It's a great fit.
So how long have you been in the community?
I've only been here since May 21st.
But you said that you came here and you really liked it, and then you looked other places. Have you been down here by vacationing, or?
My husband was a long-haul truck driver, so we've been all over the country, and one of my husband's favorite places was Tucson, actually. So, but with my background, we sort of felt that I'd have much more opportunity in the Phoenix area, and then we saw Apache Junction, and that was about it for us.
Ah.
So, yeah.
Well, besides being an escapee from Pennsylvania, which I can relate to, you also moved here on my birthday, so I'm,
Oh, there
come
you
on.
go, right?
So in your time here, have you looked or have you noticed anything that maybe Apache Junction could provide to its citizens that the Health and Human Services Commission could do to promote?
I can't say that I've really pinpointed anything. I don't think I'm here long enough to really give a reasonable answer at this point, but I would sure like to find out.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Yes.
So Jennifer, did you read a little bit about how often they meet and so
No,
far what they've been doing?
That was my next question, because you guys said the other committee didn't meet, but I know Health and Human Services is ever evolving. So really, how often do they meet?
I think Kathy can explain.
Yeah,
I'm
when
not very-
they're doing the review of the annual funding request, it can be very intense for about a 3-month window, and that's in the spring. But the commission members, including the current commission chair, wants to expand the role in the community, so I don't have a sense yet for what that might mean.
Okay, great. I think for me, being out in the community is huge. Even when I started with Arizona Early Intervention, I did all of their on-sites, which was absolutely phenomenal. So I got to travel all over Arizona. But I'm actually helping them develop a new monitoring process. So for me, when we went out, we used what they had previously used. But as I was meeting and making the relationships and talking with all our programs, everybody was really excited about moving things forward in early intervention. So actually, the on-sites really became a sort of a mini needs assessment, which was very beneficial as well, and we were really able to pinpoint, specific needs of specific areas in Arizona, as well as the needs of the program in terms of, training and what they wanted. So it's really been a great experience.
So the short of the board is that we have some funding that we designate for some local nonprofits that apply, Boys and Girls Club, CAFA, things like that. And so this board gets together and they look through the application. do all the checks and balances, make sure all the paperwork has been done correctly, audits have been done correctly. A lot of times they'll call in the head of the organizations and interview them, ask specific questions. It's really neat. It's a really neat board. And so also I wanted to ask Joel, Gail had alluded to possible conflict, being that they don't meet very often. If there would be a conflict, why she might not be able to serve on the board. So do you foresee a conflict?
Council member, it doesn't sound like it. I mean, conflicts come, they just creep in sometimes. So, but I don't see one now, and I'm sure she will, I'm sure the applicant would probably withdraw if she saw a conflict.
Well, the reason I ask is based on what we know that they do now.
Yeah, it doesn't sound
If there
like
were
it.
to be a conflict, she wouldn't.
It certainly doesn't sound
Yeah.
like any of the other allocations you've made through the budget process, through the Health and Human Services. It doesn't sound like it. So I think she'd be clear, but I'm sure if she had a question, she'd come to me and we talk
Yeah,
about it.
Absolutely.
Neat. I think you'd really enjoy it. Sounds like
Yeah,
based
well,
on-
I think my oversight background as well with the monitoring and the holistic approach would actually really dovetail very nicely with what you guys are doing. So my timing's good, right?
Several of the council members have served on that board, too.
Okay, great.
Any more questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Casuelo Kammerer. Okay, is 114th Street,
That's in the city.
is that Maricopa
That's
County?
Senior
Is that the little
Cottages, which
cluster?
is just the other side of Meridian, but
Okay.
it is
So
in the
that's-
city.
That was my question.
All right, so,
Yeah, because she answered no. Are you a resident of the city of Apache Junction?
No, he said yes.
Yeah, she said yes.
What's the next?
so Callie Hunsaker. Another,
She's the one that said no.
She said no for being in the city. Now, do they have to be?
Yes,
We can have two.
that one, 6097 East Jacob Waltz, is not in the city. However, this particular commission allows up to 2 members to be non-city but within the zone of influence.
Okay,
So you have one person on there now who is a non-city resident. So
One
you
of
could,
the-
you could do one more.
One of the people that is,
One of that is stepping down is also a non-resident, yeah.
okay.
and Chris Ferrier is not here also, correct?
Correct.
So,
Your Honor.
yes,
Kathy, do we know why those folks don't want to be reappointed? Did they say?
I know
Dana,
one of them
because she's
travels.
Really busy.
Yeah, one of them travels extensively, and the other one travels extensively. In both instances, and they regret not being able to serve, and they really enjoyed it, but it was like push and pull trying to get a quorum.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yep.
municipal property. Everybody knows what this one does? So,
Meet once a year.
we have 2 expiring. No, we have 1 expiring, 1 vacancy,
yeah, and we only got,
and only 1 wishes to be reappointed, and that's Wayne Standage. He interviewed 2 weeks ago.
This is where we could appoint somebody from another,
Like an architect or something.
something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Would there be a way to maybe contact other people that had applied last time to see if they're interested in this?
between now and tomorrow.
And how often does this one meet?
Well, they're required to meet once a year, and I think they meet once a year.
We meet once.
And is there anything on the agenda when they do meet?
So this is one that I've been a part of and we staff. It's one that is an agenda of reviewing the minutes. I believe the Municipal Property Corporation was created to allow for tax exempt bonding should you ever had a situation when you had a project that could be industrial, commercial, that you wanted to help incentivize or be able to provide that to. Since I've been here in the city, we've never utilized it as a tax exempt bonding situation. I don't see any downside to keeping it. If you ever had, an economic development came to us and we bring it to you, you might want to use this method as a way to fund it.
Okay. Can we move on? Public safety personnel retirement. And we have a note up here. What does this note mean?
The note is, this board is a creation of state law, and the state law stipulates that the 5 members shall include the mayor or the mayor's designee, 2 citizen members, and 2 members of the retirement system. That would mean the retirement system for the Apache Junction Police Department, and those 2 members have to be elected by their members. So the note that you have before you this evening is from Janine Chabot saying that the election resulted with Ernest Eaton being the department's selection.
Okay, so that's understood. Then there are 2 positions,
Right.
One of them is,
So just for
or
clarification.
just 1 position.
Just for clarification, we've got 5 people, well, Mayor Surtees on there, but then there's 4 other ones.
Right.
Those are those 4 who we appoint, or?
Well, the Carl Halperin and Paul Newman are the department's elected
Okay,
representatives.
so those are.
And
the
you have
elect-
to do a courtesy appointment of them.
And so,
And then, yeah, Jodine Weider does not wish to be reappointed, so you have a citizen vacancy, and you have 1 applicant for that citizen vacancy.
so she was just informing us that these replace Paul Newman and,
He would be replacing Carl Halperin.
no, the 2 that Jan told us, or, the 2 that were elected that we have.
Well, only 1 was elected.
Okay,
2 put their names in for nomination, and only 1 was elected.
I got you.
Okay.
And that's Officer Eaton.
So then we will pick 2 people, just
You-
1.
1 person's already been picked for
Okay,
you. You
so-
just get to.
All right, so we will
yeah.
pick 1 person then.
Correct.
And we have
Mr.
1
Kreidler-
applicant
Mr. Kreidler is here for that.
and 1 applicant,
Yes.
Steve Kreidler.
And just so, tomorrow night, we will pick 1 person.
You will pick 1, but also appoint
Appoint the
the
one that was
departments.
elected.
Correct.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Stephen Kreidler, and I believe everybody knows me. I am currently on the Planning and Zoning Commission. However, public safety personnel is near and dear to my heart, seeing how I am a retired Apache Junction police officer. So with that experience of going through the retirement system, I felt that this would be a good way for me to give back to the officers as they end up retiring. So with that, I am open to questions.
So when this board meets, the officer in question is not there, correct? I've been there twice and I don't remember, so,
Well, they're there. I mean, there's executive sessions that they're not in,
okay,
but yeah, they can be there.
yeah. So were you in your session, when you retired, did you have one of these meetings?
Yes, I was in one.
Any questions for Steve? It doesn't appear like it, so, thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Presentation and discussion on public art with Dianne Cripe of Artspace.
Thank you, Your Honor. I will kick this off tonight. We have a special guest with us who has had tremendous amount of experience in the public art arena. And tonight, our goal is to help us kind of have a framework of work as we consider.
Did we skip one?
Did we do Construction Board of Appeals?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the first one.
Judy and
That was
Jesse
The first
Gage.
one, okay, gotcha.
Sorry, Brian.
That's okay. So we have Dianne with us, who's going to give us a great presentation here in a minute. We've asked her to be our guest tonight. Over the last several months, Mayor and Council, and I would say even over the years, has had a desire to know how can we do art in the public place. And I can remember times when we started with some projects with the Main Street organization, and we started with the Quail, and then we got some grant money and did some work on the US 60. And then we did some work in the median. We had council review some of those. And then we've had our recent discussion with Kachina and a resident come forward and donate that. And then now we have, I guess from a staff perspective, we see the roundabout as another opportunity, but that's just one little sliver piece of what could happen. And we've already seen the private sector this last month in the downtown start a process to doing some public art on their own. And we will, as we create this sense of place, and it just aligns so well with some of the discussion we're having tonight about creating this wonderful place where people can be connected. Art is a big part of that. So we've asked Dianne to come and talk a little about what are the opportunities of art in the community. We've had some history. We've had other history that isn't the best, so we kind of want to get organized. So Dianne, if you could come forward and share a little bit about some of the things you've seen.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. It's an honor and a privilege to speak to you tonight about public art, which is something that's been near and dear to my heart for many years. I'm a longtime Arizonan. I've worked at ASU for the public art program and also for the city of Goodyear. So without further ado, this first slide is in downtown Phoenix, and this was not a project that I personally managed, but I was on the artist selection panel. And I use this slide to illustrate creating a sense of space because it really is a very inviting downtown area, and they didn't want to take up room with public art on the grass. And so they actually commissioned an artist to create something that would go overhead, and in many ways it's become an icon for the downtown area. So public art responds to the community. I strongly believe that unless public art really speaks to the community and actually reflects the community, it's not really successful public art. So it's a collaborative process. It's art that celebrates the city's unique history, landscape, cultures, and collective memory. It can contribute to downtown revitalization, whether it's through a permanent public art project or a temporary public art project. It can be integrated into a city's general plan or a streetscape or a park or a civic building. If it's successful, it will transform a public space and make it truly something unique for the community. And it also articulates the city's values and aspirations. It's not just where Apache Junction has been, but where it's going. And so public art can illustrate all of that. So the goal is for it to be accessible to all members of the public. Whether a child has a program in the school for art or not, the child or whoever is going to see public art out in an open space. And so it very much shows that art is a part of the community. It can connect people to a place. I've seen bridges that have an art element that was designed by a Native American artist. Her name is Rosemary Lone Wolf, and was right outside of Isaac School, which is in an underserved population in Phoenix. And what she created was a pedestrian bridge for the students to get to school, and on either side there are giant eagles, and it really speaks to the students who go there. It defines and it promotes a city identity. It can reference the city's heritage, and it can connect to other resources such as history museums. It enhances the built environment. An example of that would be if you were building a new civic building and you commissioned an artist to create a design for the glass that was specific to that purpose of the building. That's how you can integrate it in the building design. Or the landscaping. You're going to create neighborhood landmarks, and they can be very small pieces of art as well as large-scale pieces of art. Art can also promote cultural tourism. And as I said earlier, it illustrates that arts matter to the community, and in many cases, businesses that want to relocate to a city will ask about what cultural amenities do you have in your city. And so public art would be one of those amenities. This is a typical public art program. There's not really a one-size-fits-all, but I subscribe to basic practices for an organization called Americans for the Arts, which is a nationwide arts organization. And the first thing is you assess the community needs. You seek input from, if there's an arts commission, you have city-appointed people who represent their neighborhoods, staff, neighborhood groups, and so forth. If you have a percent for art ordinance, like many cities do, then you identify in the capital improvement budget where there would be an opportunity for art and how much would be spent on that particular art. So you determine the budget, and then you present a plan to council, staff, and if there's an arts commission in place, to the commission. So the process can be lengthy, but part of that is because you really want to have citizen input from every step of the project from beginning to finish. So after you've determined location and a budget, you issue a request for qualifications through different local and, depending on the budget of the project, national websites. Then you pool the community to see who would be best to serve on an artist selection panel. So usually that's 5 people or 7 people. You always have an odd number. And then you convene the panel, and then you go over with the panel, this is the process that would be followed, this is what your commitment would be in terms of time. And then the panel convenes and looks over all the submittals, depending on how many people have replied to your RFQ. And then you vote, you create a short list, maybe 3 or 4. You invite those artists to come in and talk to the panel, and they would say, not necessarily, this is what I propose for this spot, but this is how I would approach the project. And here are my past projects and why I think that my past work would be a good fit for this project. So then after the panel, and it's not the staff member or consultant who selects the artist, but it's the panel, is selected, then you negotiate the contract and the timeline with the artist. And then an artist comes back a few weeks later, maybe a month later, and says, this is what my primary or draft concept is. And then it's actually shown to a large number of people. It could be whereas the staff would have to review it to make sure that this is an actual, the budget will fit for this project, that the artist can actually build it for that amount of money. And then you can have a general public meeting, invite the public to come in and have them give input, and make sure neighborhood associations are invited to that. And then the artist goes back and creates a final design, and again presents that to the panel for approval. So what is a public artist? Why is a public artist different from someone who creates something that is shown in a gallery or museum? Well, they have to show that they've worked before in the public realm, and that there's a range of that work, and that always has artistic excellence. It has to be someone who doesn't say, here's my artwork, this is what's going to go there. It has to be somebody who can work with a large number of people and groups of people, and has to be open to public input. Usually it's someone who has had past work with an architect, engineers, landscape architects, and contractors. So they know everything going in, and of course that informs the artist's budget as well. The artist has to know durable materials. For instance, I know of an artwork that was created in fiberglass, and the artist didn't realize the effect of UV rays on fiberglass. And this is a project at ASU that was done many, many years ago, and that artwork had to be refinished and have an art conservator come in about every 3 years. So you don't want to have to do that. You want to have an artwork that is going to need minimal maintenance. And the artist has to be aware of public space. This is something where they have to work with risk management and make sure that there are no sharp edges. Someone isn't going to climb 15 feet and fall down. And and also many times, depending on the location, the police department weighs in and says the artwork here has to be transparent. It can't be something that someone is going to hide behind. So those are just some of the consideration. Integrated into design, this is a project I managed when they built a parking structure at ASU, and they had a plaza area in the front. So they were trying to figure out how are we going to create a welcoming space where students can come and they can sit. Notice it has skate stops, so you don't have the skateboard issue there. And so the artists who were selected to do this were from out of state. And the first thing they did is they went to the Desert Botanical Garden, and they got a sense of what desert plants look like. And so this is just 2 of the 5 columns that were created for that. And they're actually hand-carved from limestone. And this is a project I did when I worked for City of Goodyear. This is a park and ride, a regional park and ride. And originally, the design was for bare I-beams. And so the city Public Works Department found money in the budget. I think it was only about $50,000. And they said, let's do something to transform these bare I-beams into works of art. So we did the whole process, and the artist who was selected was actually from North Carolina. And he studied the city of Goodyear, realized the strong ties to Goodyear rubber, the cotton industry, and so what he created here, which is illuminated for the early morning risers and people get home late from work, are the cotton balls. And this is what it looks like in the daytime. It's stainless steel, very low maintenance, it's all laser cut. This is an example of really low budget neighborhood revitalization. It's an older area of Goodyear, Western Ave, which saw better days, and of course with the building of malls, traffic was diverted away from the old downtown. So the woman who owns this space said, let's do a pop-up art project. And the project is called Influx. There are about 5 cities throughout the whole Phoenix metropolitan area that send out a call to artists, and the artist submits ideas, and then it's put in the window for maybe 4 months, 5 months, and it draws people downtown. This is a developer contribution. A developer of the improvement district for this particular area was told right at the get-go that we want something that's going to be really inviting. I mean, it's going to be water retention and so forth, but part of it is going to be a park. So we want something that's going to speak to the area. And so an artist was commissioned to create a design that was translated into the form liners. And then, so now this was no cost to the city. This was actually contributed by the developer of this area. And that's another view of it. And this is an integrated project with a higher budget. So there is a percent for art ordinance, and I believe it was about $400,000. So there were people applying from all over the world to do this project because of the budget. So the artist who was selected is known for his kind of tongue-in-cheek artworks. So this is, if you're familiar with a 1920 sculptor named Constantine Brancusi, he created a sculpture in this shape, and he called it Bird in Flight. And so this artist took that shape, and we discussed the whole idea of how artists appropriate from other artists, and he turned it into a baseball, and it's in front of the ballpark, and it's probably has more selfies than any other place in the city. And this is a small project, which is in the historic neighborhood. The neighbors wanted benches. They wanted something they could sit on that wasn't going to be too hot, so the seat itself is not metal. And again, it has airplane because you've got the Goodyear Airport in that area. And the artist came up with 5 different designs. Some of them are citrus and several others, but they all have a distinct feel of the city. So this is an example of California, Southern California, of artists who put artwork in medians. And this works really great, and especially in high traffic areas. Where people are going to be slowing down, they actually have the opportunity to see it, or where you have a lot of pedestrian traffic. So this is just one example of a Southern California project, and these are a couple of other examples of median projects. Some of them are temporary, some of them are permanent, and there's another example. So Apache Junction has a very unique history in the West. It's known for its natural desert, its mountain beauty, close to recreational destinations, and its low density. So this is an example of a roundabout artwork that's actually in Sedona. And it just gives you an idea of how the artist selected materials that would really be compatible with the area. So I'm just going to show a bunch of roundabouts here. And this is an example of a gateway roundabout. So if you have a beautiful scenery of a mountain in the backdrop, this will be something in a roundabout that kind of framed the view of what was in the distance. And then these are both by local artists, and I only put the one on the left up there because this artist, this is actually from a park and ride in Phoenix, and she does wonderful cutouts, laser cuts with views of the West, and so she would create something that would be suitable for a roundabout. And the one on the bottom right, again, you're using riprap and basically rusted Corten steel sculptures. And this is for a very large roundabout, and so you want that height. And this particular city, it's not in Arizona, wanted something with a lot of color. This is at the Scottsdale Air Park, and the theme is flight. So the artist basically took the idea of if people could fly, what would it look like? And so this is basically like 3 stages of flight, which is very much apropos to the location. And that's it.
You didn't go to Wickenburg to get a picture?
I've seen the ones in Wickenburg. Those are nice. They do nice roundabouts.
Yes.
Brian, do we still have an art committee that we had from way back?
It's not active. It was, Janine might be able to help me out, several years ago when we had that group come together under the city manager's kind of direction, and that is what presented some of the initial designs to council back when that was going on. But we haven't been active since, yeah.
I almost wondered if that's something, would it be possible to actually have a commission, an art commission, like we have some of these other commissions? I wonder if maybe we want to talk about that.
So that was part of the process slide. I know tonight I really wanted to focus on learning about others, talking about brainstorming and the process, and we can, maybe at another time kick that around, but we can do that. You just have to remember that there is a process in state law that requires it to be open meeting law if you appoint it, and it would be just like tonight's boards and commissions, and then you could start the process, either through some funding, either through our budgetary process or other means.
There's still some sour feelings from the last time they did a project. Because they did all that work and then.
Oh, that's right. Now,
and then
that's one of the, that would be a great question for
fund it.
Dianne. One of the process the mayor's getting into is they as a group met, worked through a whole thing, and then when they came to council, made the recommendations. And some of that may be just because haven't gone through it that much.
Yeah, a lot of artists
Yeah.
spent a lot of time, and we picked a magnificent piece of art. It was gonna be the centerpiece of the downtown, and then we didn't fund it.
Yeah.
Your Honor,
Yes.
didn't we have the discussion, and I can't remember whether it was planning and zoning or was it in council when we decided instead of having a separate board and commission that we worked with SACA? Wasn't that
So the
how it
SACA
worked?
discussion, I'm not remembering the SACA one. I know that at the council, when you made the discussion, SACA was part of the group that worked with George Hoffman at the time. We had the last committee that made the presentation. So they were a big part of it, a couple members from the SACA board. And I'm not even sure, and that's,
Yeah.
SACA stands for Superstition
Superstition
Area Cultural Alliance. Did I get that right?
Yeah,
It's close enough.
yeah.
Close enough? I don't know.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you very much.
It's a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
I got some questions for you. That's all.
Yes.
So you were showing us those projects and things, and you had a lot of out of city or out of state. Isn't there enough artists in the valley? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. Phoenix, I've worked in different states. I'm an Arizonan, and for about 5 years, I worked in other cities, just because I wanted to see how other cities tackled public art and what their process was, and to get management experience, and I really enjoyed it. Arizona, in general, is known as having excellent public art programs.
Yeah.
And part is we're so new. And when you're building a fire station, then you have a percent for art ordinance, and then, so now you're incorporating art into the infrastructure, like SkyTrain at Sky Harbor, and so forth. So there are a lot of Arizona artists who are very skilled in public art. But part of it is you want to make sure that you get the right artist for the project, and a great artist from Arizona may not even apply, and so they're not in the running. And you do your best to advertise the RFQ on local sites like Arizona Commission for the Arts and so forth. But most cities have kind of a balance of local and national. Part of it's budget. Like if you've got a $25,000 project, you're going to do something in the park, you're probably going to get a local artist, and local meaning like from the valley. Because if you start adding up costs for travel and getting to know the area, whatever, that a lot of artists probably aren't going to apply to do that. But yeah, there's excellent artists here.
yeah. And then, public art, like you say, is becoming more and more prevalent, especially throughout the valley. and other cities throughout the country and everything. Is there you're talking, some of them, you talked a little bit about doing a capital funding of some projects and things like this, but is there a percentage of cities and towns out there that are using their local businesses or art clubs or whatever you might call them to actually do the funding as opposed to going to the citizens to
I mean, that's an excellent point, because there are basically two kinds of ordinances for public art. One is the city's percent for art ordinance, which is on city capital projects. But there's another, and there are about 3 cities in the valley that have what they call art and private development. I know Scottsdale and Tempe have those. So if you've got a commercial developer coming in, then there's, I think it's usually 1% of the construction budget. Tempe does like 45 cents on the square foot of the project. And then that comes up with a budget. And if it's developer funded, then there's always a question of who is going to select the art. And so that's where, if you work with a developer and the developer is paying for it, the developer may say, I want to use this artist, which is done in quite a few cities. But if you have a city ordinance, then it's the city that drives the project.
Yeah. So like downtown Mesa, all the artwork that was down there was paid for by businesses that collaborated together to do that. Do you see that a lot in your out there and working with cities?
Not as often as, and again, it's who is going to be driving the project, who's going to fund it, but who's going to have the final say in the project. So I don't see that happen too often. I know there are a couple of cities in Colorado that have done that. But there's always a question of taking care of the art. That is one of the things that is not thought of enough at the beginning of the project, and every time I do a contract with the artist, they have to have a maintenance plan in that contract, because the city wants to know how much is it going to cost to keep this looking good. If it's a bronze sculpture, someone's going to have to get out there and buff it. And if there's a lot of heavy rains and water accumulates, you've got to make sure that gets away from the sculpture, or it could erode it. Which happened at ASU with a steel sculpture. So, yeah, there's always the maintenance issue and the ownership issue.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Dianne. And from our perspective, this has been a great discussion. I'll be huddling with Heather, Janine, Matt, and I, and we'll keep thinking about ways and means to keep this discussion going much broader than just the roundabout, but the whole city, and working with developers as well. Thank you.
Are you ready to move on then?
We're ready. Yeah. Thank you.
And these next folks have some experience with art themselves. Yeah. Presentation and discussion by Dean Chambers of J2 regarding the active transportation plan.
Larry Kirch, Development Services. The mayor's already introduced Dean Chambers, so I won't do much. Just to recall that the city received a project through MAG, Maricopa Association of Governments, to do an active transportation plan. So we're about, 70 to 80% through with that. So Dean, without further ado, is going to walk you through the project history, where we're going, and get some input if you have any for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Mayor and council, I'm glad to be here. I hope my voice holds out. So it's what's the old saying? It's not how good you are when it's good, it's how good you are when it's bad. So, so active transportation, that's everything with a heartbeat. Walking, biking, horseback riding. And that's what we're going to go through here this evening. We've turned in the draft preliminary plan. Before I go any further, I do want to point out Aaron Allen, landscape architect with J2 Design is with us this evening, and Aaron David with Alta Planning, National Active Transportation Planners is here, and they're on the team. So we've balanced the team here with ASU and U of A grads, so we're neutral.
That's good.
So
been a little ASU.
Active transportation is increasing, even children walking to school again. through Safe Routes to School programs. But what we do know is that low income and people of color are more likely to need active transportation. They don't have a motor vehicle necessarily or access all the time to motor vehicles. Safety, we know fatalities have increased. Some of that is a function of increase of use, but we also know it's an issue with vehicle speed and having more people out there. But 16% of all the deaths in Arizona are bike and ped related. So it's very important that we have safe facilities for these users. I also want to point out that...
Matt, do you want to follow along with his presentation?
Oh, sorry. Here,
Do you want to draft?
I'll do it.
Yeah,
Thank
just
you,
use
Matt.
that right
Sorry
arrow.
about that.
Yep.
So in Arizona, there's 177,000 horses and equestrian owners, and Apache Junction is a hotbed of equestrian ownership and riding. You guys have some of the best equestrian facilities in the state. To date, we have had actually 19, including tonight, public events, and several of you, Councilman Barker, Mayor Surtee, and Vice Mayor Wilson, I know you've been to some, and if I've missed someone else that was at Lost Dutchman or the rodeo or any of the events, my apology. So there's been great support from elected officials and the citizenry. Our next event is Festival of Superstitions on November 10th. We'll have a community meeting, and we are lined up for the fries. No, not quite lined up for the fries. On November 14th, we'll come back to planning and zoning with the final plan first before we come back to you with the final plan in mid-January. So again, we've had 3 stakeholder committees: the Technical Advisory Committee, internal staff, Citizens Advisory Committee. We have some of you here from the council on that and others in the community, and then an agency team. So it's been a good cross-section in reaching out to all of these other groups. We had right at 400 responses to our survey, and I selected out a couple of things. So where do you live? About 70% of the respondents are either full-time, part-time residents or winter visitors that responded. The age, about 80% was 45 and older, so midway we did do some specific outreach to more of the high school age. We got a little bit more in there, but I think it's very reflective of the community. And then what is most important? So number 1, trails. Number 2, sidewalks and paths. Number 3, bike lanes, in that order. So general feedback, people want the network connected. So don't want that dead end like at the end of 16th Street where it hits. You have these beautiful bike lanes, you dead end and you can't get into Mesa. So looking at issues like that. Safer facilities. So looking at buffering bike lanes, pedestrian safety, separating sidewalks, providing adequately sized sidewalks, and good crossing locations and assistive devices for the signal, such as signal timing or refuge in a median. The existing facilities, there are quite a few trails, already almost 86 miles of trails in the city, and most of that is concentrated in the 7, the open space along the power lines. There's 108 miles of sidewalk, but there's still quite a bit of infill in some of the older neighborhoods. There's 11 miles of bike lanes, which is fairly low for the number of miles of road. So safety, since 2009 to 2016, that's the data set available, there have been 71 pedestrian collisions and 8 fatalities in the city or within our planning area. There have been 102 bicycle collisions and 3 fatalities. And what we take from this is these are heavily concentrated, the collisions are heavily concentrated on Apache Trail from Meridian to Idaho, and on arterial roadways first, collector roadways second. And you can relate speed to the severity of the injury for the pedestrian or the bicyclist. It's mass and speed. We follow 6 guiding principles, the 6 E's: education, enforcement, encouragement, engineering, evaluation, and equity throughout the plan. And this plan will be submitted for a bike-friendly and walk-friendly community status to the bike community and the walking community, the national organizations. On public health, there's a couple of things. Apache Junction has the fifth highest chronic disease rate in the state. A certain amount of that is probably age-related. I fall in that category. And, but one of the good news is that there's a high level of health insurance among your residents. You're one of the highest rates. Again, maybe an age issue. But really, I think if we think of wellness on health, of people walking, biking, you know, a winter visitor comes with their bikes, bringing those along. They want to ride down to dinner, meet their friends. So those sorts of things, besides the full-time resident need, it's an attraction for visitors. So, summary of goals is connectivity, safety, health, having adequate capacity, and the experience. And having signature destinations, signature trails, signature trailheads, signature routes, such as we've coined the Legacy Loop, looping around the city. The old Apache Trail cuts through the northern part of the open space. And then what if a trailhead was named? So those become more human, more connected. So the overall plan, all those lines of spaghetti, they all have meaning, but this is all the bike, pedestrian, and trails. So biking in bike lanes and on shared use paths, walking on sidewalks, shared use paths and trails, horseback riding on trails. So you can see that this connected network is throughout the existing city and the future development south of baseline. So really setting the city up to have good standards and routes so when development occurs, you're getting quality connected networks. And the Legacy Loop is this piece across the north, starting up at Meridian. And this has been on the plan for the open space trail system since 1993, a shared use path. You've built many of the trails and step over connections and gates. So finishing out trailheads and a shared use path with a side trail, that would continue down in the future development area down Siphon Draw. There'll be drainage coming off the mountain, coming down to the CAP. The CAP trail is on the books, connecting that back up, and then filling this gap, this missing link, coming back north along Meridian, but also looking at Apache Trail, Old West Highway, connecting along, and potentially mid-mile crossings with bridges over the freeway, not squeezing everybody in those high-speed, high-activity areas at the freeway. So the following is just an enlargement. And one thing I want to touch on is you have a unique issue. You have quite a bit of state land in the community. The south area is prime for development. It's just a matter of when. So setting you in a good position for when that development occurs. If it occurs along the north and east open spaces, and we know there's some flood control issues, some neighborhood relationship issues, but setting the city up to retain all those access points, both to and from public right-of-way and public space. So that's all those little dots with arrows. So when development, if it comes, would need to provide trail connections, easements through. I won't hold on the bike map or the pedestrian map. They look very similar, but that's everything you could bike, pedestrian, everything you could walk. And then we get to street classifications. So in 2012, you did a city transportation plan, and that looked forward to a build-out of 130-some thousand population in the future. And based on that, we looked at what would be the right number of lanes. What's the right size? So if you were building an existing road today, would you build less? Would you build more? And if there's excess capacity, is that opportunity to introduce active transportation in that right-of-way you own and pavement you own? In the future areas, those will be built out based on projected capacity. So we have the 4 areas of the community, and this is existing standards within the city, which are based on your character areas: downtown, rural, standard, and Lost Dutchman Heights. So the first group is the downtown area. So there are a few projected roadways. So we are suggesting in the downtown area from about Rennick to Idaho, a multi-lane boulevard. So it carries the capacity, the flow-through traffic in the center, and creates commerce areas with parking and sidewalks with buildings right up to the edge, and still has horses, trails, bikeways, sidewalks throughout. Then in the rest of Apache Trail and Old West Highway, keeping the 60 to 80 foot wide median and sizing the lanes and capturing the edges for active transportation, biking, walking, and landscape areas.
Did you want to take questions during this? Or
Sure, I'm completely flexible.
I haven't had any till now, but what you've just talked about, what about the speed limit?
So in the downtown area, it would, so where it goes to a multi-lane boulevard, that would be dependent upon the number of crossings, streets intersecting. So there won't be multiple driveways off of this. So
it would have to be slower than now, correct? Or
it would be better, yes. So as slow as probably 30 to 35 on the main line would be preferred. It could be up to 40, 45 if there's signals.
45 means 52.
Yes, I understand. Excuse me. On the side streets, the parking zone, really 15 to 20. That's a slow mixed zones.
That means 25.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, it's a parking lot
Yeah.
on those edges, yes. So the rest of the streets, because we are recommending buffering the bike lanes, either with physically separating, and we're still going through some safety analysis, or keeping them on the roadbed, but separating and buffering with striping and delineators.
That's impressive, but what about private property? How does that, is that going to affect on that plan that we're on right now, where you're at?
Let me click
You would need buy-in from several private property folks, I think, unless I'm misinterpreting.
Yeah, so let me jump over here. This is a similar project. It's Cathedral City. It's Palm Canyon Drive. We worked on with Friedman Tongue, Bottomley out of the Bay Area about 20 years ago. Very similar. It's the old highway from LA to Palm Springs. Cuts right through. If you look on an old postcard, it looks very similar to Apache Junction with the highway cutting through. So it was, they realized redevelopment, the city was changing. There was redevelopment opportunity for the community, and this was the plan of still moving vehicles through the center, but creating those walking, parking areas for commerce on the sides. So that is an approach we would suggest, but only from Rennick to Apache Trail. So where the downtown and the redevelopment area is. Outside of that, keep the signature median.
And if you talk to most people, they all want that to happen. It's just a matter of they don't want to give up their speed limit, and
right.
So we need to sell this and get buy-in on that.
So yes, deeper traffic analysis, but an economic analysis. But an example I can throw out is downtown Chandler was 6-lane, and it was changed to 4 and added on-street parking. So it went from, was it 40 mile an hour, 45 through the area? It was decreased to 25 right in the downtown, and sales revenues went up over 11% the first year. So it became a destination instead of a cut-through. So it's that balancing act.
A couple factors that could possibly help is if something would happen to the Grand Hotel property or the old Bash's property, and they started to redo this, that would be a catalyst to make this all happen, if that ever would happen.
And that could be done with the north side of the road with them. Then it's just a matter of working out driveway connections on the south side. And then when
There's even talk of doing a whole new streetscape on those two properties, which would tie right into this perfectly.
I remember when we first did Plaza, it was our first on-street parking project, and I remember some in the community think, oh no, people are going to get in a wreck. And so it's how these things start. You start with a vision, and then you start to find out where a project could interact and correlate, and then you try it. I love pilot tries. And
right. So it has to be a partnership with the private development. They have to be bought in. It would be great if the hotel site was the first to kick it off, because that's a big splash.
So has Janine and Elon been involved with this as well?
Yes, she has, and she is on the technical advisory committee, and we did a specific outreach meeting to the downtown committee.
Because this would be a good portfolio to help her to sell this when she would show this to potential buyers.
Yeah. So the other thing is creating a walkable network of shorter blocks in the downtown area. So trying to get them under that magic 300 feet is better, is ideal. When blocks get really long, people tend not to walk in an area. So that opens up those areas onto the north, back into the lots. So another thing we see in a safety issue and traffic flow issue along Apache Trail and Old West Highway is the current turn movements at all of the drives and non-signalized intersections. So you pull into that, and only one car each direction can sit there. Hopefully somebody doesn't block you. You get out and do the dance out there in the median. So we're suggesting a median U-turn. A slang term is Michigan turn. Another is a Texas turnaround. But these eliminate the crossing, and essentially it's an expanded roundabout. So about 300 feet each way from the intersection. You make a right, you go in, make a left, and go to your destination. So it cuts conflicts from 35 conflicts in the existing intersection to 2. So it really opens up the flow of traffic. And so you're not having that stacking that occurs out in the median.
That would also help businesses wherever those occurred.
It opens up pedestrian and bike crossing areas in the middle. Currently, there's no facility, and you're kind of a sitting duck out there with all those car movement conflicts.
We rarely see folks inside. If you want to get from Dirtwater to the village, I don't know if I've seen people sprint there.
No.
So, yes, one of the comments we received in the feedback of the public meetings was people that lived on the south side of Apache Trail said, I don't shop at Fry's anymore because I won't cross Apache Trail. That was a comment of some residents. So this is quite a change in this area.
I know my feedback was also to get lighting down there as well for what restaurants we have, because
right.
so that a lot of people won't go because it's so dark down there.
Yes, lighting in some of the neighborhoods and on some of the streets were issues brought up, and also not wanting lighting in the rural areas and respecting that. So the next, the lead-in to rural roads, keeping it very rural. So right now, there are some trails on maps. Essentially, you're walking or riding your horse on the shoulder, keeping those trails in the local streets. And then ratcheting up, adding a sidewalk on collectors. So example, TP, children walking to the school, getting a sidewalk. And we get to collectors, getting a sidewalk on each side. So it's more of an industrial area. And then ultimately, something like Lost Dutchman Highway, Goldfield, those main arterial roads, getting bike lanes and walking and trail facilities on those. The next are standard streets, which is the central part of the city. So really getting sidewalks. Where you have sidewalks, keep the sidewalks. But if you install new sidewalks, let's pull them off the curb and try and plant some shade along those routes. Harvest a little water off the street for the trees. Then working up the ladder to commercial and collector streets, adding bike lanes. Then a change is on the minor arterial. Currently, it is shown as 4 lanes with no turn, no left turn in the standard. And we're recommending adding a 2-way turn lane in the middle and going to a single lane each way, which actually has more capacity than the 4-lane. Believe it or not, it does. You can carry about 20,000 cars per day on this recommended section. And an example would be Superstition Boulevard, 16th Street. And Superstition Boulevard carries about 12,000 right now, maybe? 8,000 on Superstition. So there's not a big capacity need on these. So looking at right sizing. And then for the arterials, unless needed, and we're not seeing the data in the projections, 2 lanes each way with a center turn lane. And medians could be added if desired. And then the last is Lost Dutchman Heights, all the areas south of baseline. We looked at their standards. They did not have local or collector streets, so we defined those. And then we worked right off of their arterial and parkway streets and added in bike lanes. They did not have bike facilities in their standards, and which is kind of surprising because that will be a real market for them. So then the trails map, everywhere you can ride a horse, mountain bike, walk. Again, it's the connected network around the city. Trail sections, backcountry trails, so something like some of the narrower trails out in the open space up on Silly Mountain, little 2-4-foot trails, working up to shared trails, 4 to 8 feet, and then shared use paths, so a paved 10-foot wide plus a side path that a horse could ride down, runners could run on a soft trail. So again, connecting the network. And then last, we've looked at the current CIP, the next 5 years forward, and we've taken the approach of how do we tag on to pavement maintenance, pavement replacement, or new construction, and it's work you're doing anyway. How do we stripe it, make sure you're doing the ADA anyways. So these are no to low cost improvements in the next 5 years. Out beyond that is when some reconstruction that we'll be looking at, but we wanted to get through this meeting first before we start plugging in numbers and priorities. And then last, questions.
Any questions, Jeff?
Mayor. So I know, I'm not, you know, you talk about education and, you know, when you're driving out there, especially at night and in some of our streets that don't have lighting and everything, you come upon a bike rider, a bicyclist that, I mean, how do you reach the people that are riding in the night that probably don't have access to either, I don't know, newspaper or anything? I mean,
right.
How do you go about reaching that?
So starting young, grow them as good,
Okay.
educated bike
Yeah.
and walkers. Work with the schools, the police department on having those programs. The next is having the facility so they're not out in the street. Having that crossing so they're crossing at a good location. Having enough crossings for them that they're not jaywalking, cutting in an undesired place.
Yeah.
So it's much of it is they don't really have an option many times right now. It's that risk reward. You know, you get to say Thunderbird, and you go, there's no way I'm going to walk back to Apache Trail or Ironwood. I'm just going to cut.
Right.
So if there's facility, we want them crossing right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a safe manner.
And so going forward, because you'd mentioned your long-term projection is 135,000 people or something, you said.
Yes.
So obviously, that would change the makeup of the population or the age of the city probably, because we'd
Yes.
probably go younger. And so how would, obviously, that would change some of these, would that change any of the things that we have to look at? Or
Not really. I think all of those things that are attractive to a more aged population are also attractive to young families. They want to be out in those walking, hiking, biking.
Yeah.
I think the equestrian use may go down, just like we're seeing hunting going down. But it doesn't matter whether you're walking a human or a horse walking, it's still a trail. Mm-hmm. And they mix nicely. It doesn't eliminate anyone, it keeps them all there.
And then is there any thought, because the Pinell County is trying, or they are, you know, improving their parks and trail systems throughout, and especially down south, east there and everything.
Yes.
Is there thought process and coordinating with them?
So they're on our agency advisory committee. We've reviewed their plans, Tondo Forest, State Park, County Park, and Mesa, and Queen Creek. And we are looking at those connections. We're showing those connecting up.
And so, and then also like first and second water and all those up into the superstitions and stuff.
So
Goes in it.
on out, so this goes to the planning boundary.
Okay.
So we really only go up to McKellips and east to, Larry, help me, it's the mile east of Goldfield. Mountain View.
No.
Okay. So the Tondo Forest on the north and east. And we did look into Gold Canyon because it's kind of a squiggly line for the planning area as it reaches there. The west is pretty set, at Meridian, and south is State Route 24, Germain, working with Queen Creek.
Correct.
On that edge.
Okay. Anyone else?
I just like, this is a wonderful piece.
Thank you.
Excellent, excellent job.
It was the most interesting, fun thing I've read in a long time. What's interesting?
Okay, staff, you heard
I
that.
was gonna say,
What I thought was
You need a
interesting,
light.
no, I just said, it was really great. What I thought was interesting is that, when we were repaving our Apache Trail, we actually had some of these conversations, about possible designing and redesigning with our former, Public Works Director. And so to see this come back to be resurfaced is really pretty interesting. Hopefully we'll be able to do some of these things. These are pretty awesome, so.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So big step tonight. The Planning, Zoning, Parks and Rec Commission, a lot of members of our community have reviewed. Now we've had an opportunity. We'll keep coming and eventually look for an opportunity to accept and approve this plan in January. So still some more work to do, but it is super exciting and it is lay the groundwork for our future.
Okay. What's the easy way to get back to the first page without doing this?
Just tap on it once,
Top.
and upper left corner, hit the.
Okay, I didn't, all right.
we're learning our iPads.
They're
or
learning it. It's
Whatever.
good.
Presentation and discussion on bid responses for the Winchester Road Sidewalk Improvements Project. Mike Weaver with no A.
Thank you. Mayor, Council, Mike Weaver, Public Works Director. Do we have that memorandum or? Thank you.
What are you looking for?
Oh,
This?
Raquel has a sheet. I was hoping it would be there, but I wasn't good enough. Don't worry, I can wing it.
Resolution, Councilman?
On Winchester, we took bids on the project from Winchester from 16th to Southern. The bids came back $538,000 over. Engineering, myself, talked about different ways to fund it. Her budget really doesn't have $500,000 worth of, thank you. But the HERF budget doesn't really have $500,000 worth of wiggle room, so we think our best option is to reject bids, go to MAG for closeout funds.
Right.
And while we're there, we're going to go for closeout funds on Southern and see how that goes, and then rebid it after that function. But the paperwork will go to MAG shortly. I think that goes to MAG TAC in December, and then further approved in January. So by January, we should know. I don't think it's a big issue if this project lasts or takes another 6 months or whatever, but funding-wise, it is a big issue. So I would recommend that we reject it and go to closeout.
And when will we vote? Will this be in?
So is it on? It's not for tomorrow night, I don't think, but.
Not the consent agenda or not?
Sorry about that.
It'll be up at a future meeting, Mayor.
Okay.
We bring it in, yeah.
Will that be in a consent agenda?
Typically, something like this would be consent.
Written as us rejecting it, or will we have to read the consent agenda to reject it?
I think we usually just put it on consent, Joel.
Well, whoever makes the motion.
Yeah.
Usually it's in the motion already,
Yeah.
unless you want to talk about it.
The
and then you
motion will
pull
be
it.
rejecting it.
Or you can,
It'll be part
and
of
if you,
It'd just be part of the consent agenda
Yeah.
motion to accept that agenda, and that would take care of this.
Okay.
We have some MAG and ADOT money for this area, don't we, or?
Correct. We
Yes.
received funding for it, but anything over the engineer's estimate or ADOT's estimate, we pay 100% of.
Right.
So the full
Okay.
funding would be ours.
Okay, I see where you're going.
Okay.
Thank you.
You bet.
You probably don't make that much money, do you?
Just a couple bucks short, but
Here,
I have a couple
Yes.
kids in college too.
Hey, Mike, do you know why it came out so much higher than?
We don't know, because I thought maybe it'd be the designer, but the same designer was used on Winchester as on Delaware. Delaware came in under estimate and Winchester came in over, so.
I don't recall when they had such a big difference before. That's
And
pretty unusual.
I'm afraid we're gonna start seeing this a little bit right now with all of the boom, I guess.
And the tariffs,
Yeah.
we're gonna be paying.
But there is actually some funding in MAG, so we're hoping that things will go well at closeout.
Right.
It's one of the
Got
great
my
things
vote.
about us in our relationship with our COGS in MAG and CAG is that we have worked hard to be a part of that. And these types of things, if we're ready and we're poised and we show that we're ready to make these projects happen, we can be a candidate for them.
Is that everything on this?
Nope.
I mean, that's everything on this?
That's it, yep.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Update and discussion on 18 and 19 neighborhood partnership meetings.
Your Honor, I'll take this and just wanted to give everyone an update on where we're at. We're on the eve of our new season for the neighborhood meetings. And what we are ready to embark on is a new little wrinkle that I think is something that's we've talked about over the years, which is the connection to neighborhoods that are here full-time. For example, we've connected to Cimarron, and we've connected to the different HOA groups. Now, what we're finding is the needs to interact and how they interact is different than what we've done. Meaning that because they work and have regular efforts and they're just smaller groups and they are all very interested in meeting us and talking to us. However, the typical size is going to be 5 or 6 people. And so what that means in terms of trying to balance our, want to overwhelm them, is that we have set up for this year, we're still going to have about 14 to 15 total neighborhoods, about 7 full-time neighborhood meetings, and 7-ish winter visitor type groups. So for those 7 that we have, we're going to have our regular group become part of their there's a location to host everybody. We can bring all our council. We can bring the city attorney. We could bring the library. We could bring, other departments. However, for the 7 that we're going to embark on, and again, this is an opportunity to try something new, is that we won't need that many people. In fact, tomorrow night, we have our first one with Cimarron, and what I'm proposing, at least for tomorrow, and then the other 6 we can start talking about is taking turns with, for example, Matt, Al, and I in the city manager's office. Only one of us will go there. For the police department, it'll be either Chief Arnold, so Chief might be here tomorrow, but Arnold might be at Cimarron to be there with Al, for example. And so we're going to be flexible in how we kind of work those, but if we had as many as 10 people, 12 people show up, sometimes they don't even have room big enough that they're in a small room. And so what I kind of thought we would do, unless I hear differently, is assign each one of you to a different one to give you each an opportunity to experience that. And then for this year, I would like feedback at the end, probably May or whenever we get through the season of the neighborhood meetings. Then we can kind of talk about how we felt that went, how it didn't, what went well, what didn't, kind of a thing. So we have scheduled 7 winter visitor meetings. That could change over time too as we go through the next 6 months. And we already have 7 full-time neighborhoods with HOA boards. What we're finding is as we work with those full-time neighborhood HOA groups is they have their own methods of communication. They use a Nextdoor app or they use their own private Facebook organization to communicate with their own people. And that's another opportunity to connect with Al, primarily in our public information office, to be able to share with them as part of our constant contact through events and things that are going on. Make sure they're plugged in on our communication avenues. That was it. I just wanted to share that's kind of where we're headed and what we've got scheduled for the 18-19
Just some
neighborhood season.
feedback, just because you only have 5 or 6 people, they could well be going back to their communities and reporting, and each one of them can talk to 5 other people. So you're reaching more than 5 people.
Exactly. We have had, I forget the one, Matt, we had one that we tried on not too long ago. It was which neighborhood?
Yeah, end of August, we went to Sunrise Canyon, me and Chief Kelly, and had a great interaction with that HOA board. They met in the junior high down by the high school, and 5 board members, a couple of community members in there, had very positive interaction. They gave great feedback to us. They love living in the city that they do, and they love to be involved, so they're excited to have us there. So it was a real positive touch point in the community, and the mayor's right. I really believe that those are leaders in their community, and they take that information back and spread that information we give them, so.
So are you gonna have the mayor and a council member, or are you just gonna?
We could do something like that. I was just thinking of just rotating all 7 of you, but I don't, yeah, just kind of
We,
looked at it that way.
we need to be communicating then, because in the past, we've had certain council folks that are stronger on certain things, and we've handed off to Robin for the library, et cetera, and domestic violence and.
That's a great point. We just got some feedback tonight, while we're here from the one tomorrow regarding some area that they'll be more interested in, and so that could mean we need to send parks
So if we are
or.
sending Chip and Krista, we need to brief them on what we want to
Right.
get out there.
Right.
But we really can't keep anybody away either, though. I mean, if everybody wants to go,
Correct.
council-wise, I think all the councils should go if they want to.
Correct.
But staff, it's not necessary to have so much staff.
Correct. I don't know how we would not have y'all, y'all show up. That would be, it's up to you. From our standpoint, we won't need the city attorney. We won't need, library. We won't need all of the police command staff. We won't need me and Al, for example.
But all of
Just be
council
overwhelming to them.
would be welcome to go to any of these.
We can let y'all know, and I don't know, maybe I would like to pre-work with you on the messaging, though, from it, because I do think it's for them, and if we're there just to do each something, I feel like then it gets into something that we're doing to them. Does that make sense? And we're trying to connect in that relationship. This is the first time with them. And certainly we want to have a message that we'll want to share each time we go. We typically have some things that we share, and Al can help coordinate that to each one. Maybe that's how we look at it. Maybe we have a person that's assigned to come and talk about the things that are going on in the city, and then the other then we can be there for question and answer at the end. And each neighborhood will be different. Like I said, we don't know, we did the one in St. George's, that's new. We've done that like 2 times. Then the Sunrise Canyon, we'll go over to my neighborhood, we'll go to a few other neighborhoods.
Any more input? Just a report on my tablet. I've been plugged in the whole time, and I went from 93% down to 86%. I think without being plugged in, I'd have probably been in the 30s or 40s after all the scrolling. So it didn't gain any power, but I didn't lose so much, so.
We'll let Jill know. She brought in the chargers, so that's good, Yeah.
If nothing else, then we'll be adjourned until tomorrow.